God was harder to find in Korea. That's the thought that kept coming back to me. Winter of 1951, standing in frozen trenches at 30 below zero, watching frost-bitten boys die calling out for the Almighty, and I couldn't find him anywhere. Couldn't feel his presence, couldn't hear his voice. Just wind and cold and suffering that seemed to have no purpose. I was supposed to have answers. That was my job. Captain Robert Anderson, United States Army Chaplain Corps, Lutheran minister from Minnesota. 34 years old when they deployed me to Korea in November 1951. I'd wanted to be a chaplain since seminary, felt called to serve, to bring comfort to soldiers, to be God's presence in dark places. Korea was the darkest place I'd ever seen. I grew up in Minneapolis. Good family, church every Sunday, strong faith. My father was a pastor too. Small congregation, working class neighborhood. I watched him comfort the grieving, counsel the troubled, celebrate the joyous. Saw how faith could sustain people through hardship. Knew I wanted to do the same. Seminary at Luther College, ordained in 1943. Too late for most of World War II, but I served as a chaplain stateside, ministering to soldiers at training bases. Good work, important work. Boys heading off to war needed spiritual support, needed someone to pray with them, to remind them that God was with them even in combat. The war ended before I deployed overseas. I went back to civilian ministry, took a church in St. Paul, married a wonderful woman named Sarah. We had a daughter, Emily. Life was good, peaceful. I preached on Sundays, visited the sick, counseled couples, baptized babies. The work I was meant to do. Then Korea happened. June 1950, the North invaded. President Truman committed American forces. The Army needed chaplains. I was in the reserves. They called me up in early 1951. Sarah cried when I told her. You have a congregation here, a family. Why do they need you? The boys in Korea need me more, I said. Believed it too. Felt called. God was sending me where I was needed most. I arrived in Korea in November 1951. They assigned me to the 7th Infantry Division, operating in the eastern mountains near the Chosin Reservoir area. The division had been mauled during the Chinese offensive the previous winter. Now they were dug in along the MLR, main line of resistance, holding positions in brutal terrain against constant Chinese probing attacks. My first day, they brought me to the battalion aid station. 3 boys laid out on stretchers. All 3 had frozen to death overnight in their foxholes. Not shot, not blown up, just frozen. The cold had killed them as surely as any bullet. Welcome to Korea, Chaplain, the battalion surgeon said. Hope you brought your faith. You're going to need it. I had brought my faith, strong faith. Unshakable faith, the kind of faith that had sustained me through seminary and ministry and every challenge I'd faced. It lasted about a week. The cold was beyond anything I'd imagined. 20, 30, 40 below zero. Wind that cut through every layer of clothing. Your breath would freeze in your beard. Water in canteens would freeze solid. Equipment would freeze and break. And men would freeze too if they didn't keep moving, keep active, keep fighting the cold every single minute. I made my rounds to the companies dug in along the ridge, walked the trenches, visited the bunkers, talked to the boys. They were young, so young, 18, 19, 20 years old. Farm boys from Iowa and factory workers from Detroit and college kids who'd been drafted mid-semester. They'd ask me questions. Why are we here, Chaplain? Does God care about Korea? Will I make it home? I'd give them the answers I'd been trained to give. We're here to stop communism, to protect the free world. God cares about all his children. Have faith and trust in the Lord. The words sounded hollow even as I spoke them, Because what did stopping communism mean to a 19-year-old sitting in a frozen trench, watching his friends die from frostbite and artillery fire? How did protecting the free world explain why they were suffering on some nameless Korean ridge that would be forgotten as soon as the war ended? But I kept saying the words. That was my job. Provide comfort, maintain morale, give them something to believe in when everything else was falling apart. Private Michael Torres from Texas asked me to pray with him on my third day there. He was 20 years old, scared, sitting in a bunker that smelled like unwashed bodies and stale cigarette smoke. "I don't think I'm going to make it, Chaplain," he said quietly. "I can feel it. Something bad is coming." "You can't think like that, son. Have faith. God will protect you." "Will he?" "Because I've been praying every night, and I don't think he's listening. I don't think he's here." I put my hand on his shoulder, prayed with him. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The words felt empty, rote, like I was reciting lines from a script rather than speaking truth. Michael Torres died 4 days later. Chinese night attack. Mortar round landed in his bunker. He was right. Something bad was coming. His faith didn't protect him. My prayers didn't save him. I conducted his memorial service on a frozen hillside. A dozen men standing in the wind, rifles in hand, while I read from my Bible with numb fingers. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Would Michael see God? Was he comforted now, or was he just gone? A young life ended on a frozen Korean ridge for reasons none of us really understood. I didn't know. That terrified me. I was supposed to know, supposed to have certainty. That's what faith was, certainty in the unseen, trust in God's plan even when you couldn't understand it. But I didn't feel certain. I felt lost. December was worse. The fighting intensified. The Chinese launched attacks along the entire line. Our boys fought them off, but at terrible cost. The casualties kept coming, not just from combat, from the cold. Frostbite was epidemic. Men would lose fingers, toes, entire limbs to the cold. The medical battalion couldn't keep up. I spent my days moving between positions, praying with men, conducting services, writing letters to families of the dead. At night, I'd sit in my bunker, barely warmer than outside, and try to pray. Try to find some connection to God, some sense of his presence, and nothing. Just cold and silence. They brought me to see a boy named Danny Kowalski one morning. Polish kid from Milwaukee, 19 years old. He'd been on patrol the night before, got separated from his unit in a firefight, spent the night hiding in a shell crater in no man's land. By the time they found him at dawn, his feet were frozen solid, black, dead tissue. The surgeon was matter of fact. "We'll have to amputate both legs, probably below the knee. Maybe higher if the tissue damage goes further up." Danny was conscious when I went to see him. In shock, but conscious. He looked at me with desperate eyes. "Chaplain, pray for me. Please, pray that they can save my legs. I can't go home without my legs. Please." I held his hand, prayed, asked God to spare this boy's legs, to work a miracle, to show mercy. They amputated both legs above the knee. The tissue damage was too extensive. Danny woke up from surgery and realized what they'd done. Started screaming. Kept screaming until they sedated him. I sat with him later, after the sedation wore off. He looked at me with dead eyes. "You prayed for me." Yes. God didn't listen. Sometimes his answer is no. Sometimes his plan is different from what we want. "Fuck his plan," Danny said quietly. "Fuck him. Where was he when my feet were freezing? Where was he when I was crying in that crater? Where is he now? I didn't have an answer. The platitudes I'd been trained to give, God works in mysterious ways, his plan is beyond our understanding, they sounded obscene in the face of a 19-year-old who'd just lost his legs. I don't know, I finally said. I don't know where he is. Danny turned away from me, never spoke to me again. They evacuated him a few days later. I heard later he killed himself in a VA hospital in 1953. Couldn't live with what the war had taken from him. My prayers hadn't saved Michael Torres, hadn't saved Danny Kowalski's legs, hadn't saved any of the hundreds of boys I'd prayed with who died anyway. What was the point? What was I doing here? Christmas Eve, 1951. The battalion commander wanted me to hold a service, something to boost morale, remind the men what they were fighting for, give them hope. I set it up in a large bunker behind the lines. Fit maybe 50 men inside. They came, Catholics and Protestants and Jews and probably some atheists who just wanted to get out of the cold for an hour. Dirty, exhausted, haunted-looking boys sitting on ammunition crates and sandbags. I stood in front of them with my Bible, started reading the Christmas story, the birth of Christ, peace on earth, goodwill toward men, the promise of salvation, of hope, of God's love made manifest. Halfway through, artillery started falling nearby, Chinese harassment fire. The bunker shook. Dirt fell from the ceiling. Nobody moved, nobody flinched. They were used to it. I kept reading. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior who is Christ the Lord. A Savior. Born to save humanity from sin and death. Born to bring peace to a broken world. I looked at the faces in front of me. Boys who'd seen friends blown apart, who'd killed other boys in desperate close combat, who lived in holes in frozen ground and wondered if they'd survive another day, who prayed for deliverance that never came. Where was the Savior for them? Where was the peace? Where was God's love in this frozen hell? Chaplain? Someone in the back. You okay? I'd stopped reading, just standing there, Bible open, unable to continue. I'm fine, I managed. Finished the reading, led them in a prayer, silent night, away in a manger, sang the carols we'd all grown up singing, songs about peace and joy and hope. The artillery kept falling outside, men kept dying, the cold kept killing. And I stood there singing about peace on earth while the earth was frozen and violent and completely absent of peace. After the service, men came up to shake my hand, thank me, tell me the service meant a lot to them, gave them comfort. I smiled, said the right things, prayed with those who asked, played my role. But inside, I felt nothing, empty, hollow. Like I was an actor in a play, reciting lines I no longer believed. Sergeant William Chen, Chinese-American kid from San Francisco, stayed after the others left. Good soldier, squad leader, respected by his men. That was a good service, Chaplain, he said, even if you didn't believe a word of it. What makes you think that? I could see it in your face. You're losing your faith, aren't you? I wanted to deny it, wanted to defend myself, but I couldn't lie. Not to him, not to myself. I don't know what I believe anymore, I admitted. I came here to bring God's comfort to soldiers. But I can't find God anywhere. I look for him in the faces of the dying, in the suffering, in the cold and the violence. He's not here. Or if he is, he's silent, absent, indifferent. Chen nodded slowly. Maybe God isn't in the big things, the miracles and the interventions. Maybe he's in the small things. The fact that we're still here, still trying, still caring about each other, even when everything is shit. That's not enough. Maybe it has to be. He left. I sat alone in that bunker for hours, trying to pray, trying to feel something, anything. Nothing came. January 1952, the coldest month. Temperatures dropped to 50 below. Men were dying from the cold faster than from Chinese attacks. Frostbite casualties overwhelmed the medical system. Entire units were combat ineffective because too many men couldn't function in the extreme cold. I kept making my rounds, praying with men, conducting memorial services, writing letters, going through the motions. Then they brought me to a bunker where a boy was dying. Private James Murphy from Boston, 18 years old, gut wound from mortar shrapnel. The medics had done what they could, but the wound was too severe. He had maybe an hour, maybe less. He was conscious, in terrible pain despite the morphine, crying, calling for his mother. "Chaplain's here," someone said. "He'll pray with you." James looked at me. Am I going to die? The honest answer was yes. Obviously, yes. But I was supposed to provide comfort, not truth. I don't know, son. But God is with you. He'll take care of you. I'm scared, he whispered. I don't want to die. Please pray that I don't die. I knelt beside him in that freezing bunker, held his hand, started to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. He died while I was praying, halfway through the Lord's Prayer. Just stopped breathing, 18 years old. Died scared and in pain, far from home, in a frozen bunker in Korea. I finished the prayer, closed his eyes, stayed kneeling there, and something broke inside me. Finally, completely broke. I walked out of that bunker into the frozen night, walked away from the positions toward the rear. Didn't know where I was going, didn't care, just walked. Found myself in a supply area, empty. Sat down in the snow behind a stack of ammunition crates and screamed, just screamed into the frozen air, screamed at God, at the war, at the cold, at the futility of everything. Where are you? I was yelling at the sky. Where the fuck are you? These boys are dying. They're praying to you. They believe in you, and you're not here. You're not answering. You're just letting them die in this frozen hell. No answer. Just wind and cold and silence. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep lying to them. Can't keep telling them you care when you clearly don't. Can't keep praying prayers that do nothing. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. Eventually, Chen found me. Must have noticed I'd wandered off. He sat down in the snow beside me. Didn't say anything. Just sat. I've lost my faith, I finally said. I can't find God anywhere. Can't feel his presence. Can't believe anymore that any of this has meaning or purpose. I'm a chaplain without faith. What am I supposed to do? Chen was quiet for a long time. Then, maybe you keep doing the job anyway. Not because you have faith, because they need you to have faith. Because your doubt doesn't matter as much as their need for hope. That's dishonest. Maybe. Or maybe it's the most honest thing you can do. Keep carrying their prayers even when you don't believe they're heard. Keep blessing the dying even when you don't know if there's anyone listening. Keep being the symbol of hope even when you have none yourself. That sounds like hell. It is hell. But so is everything else here. I stayed in Korea until June 1952, 7 months total. Kept doing my job, praying with soldiers, conducting services, writing letters to families, going through the motions. But the faith was gone. That certainty, that connection to God I'd felt my entire life, it was just gone. Lost somewhere in the frozen trenches of Korea. left behind with Michael Torres and Danny Kowalski and James Murphy and all the others who died despite my prayers. They rotated me home, back to Minnesota. Sarah and Emily met me at the airport. My daughter had grown, 3 years old now, barely remembered me. My wife cried with relief that I was home safe. The Army wanted me to return to chaplain duty stateside. Counsel soldiers at training bases, conduct services, prepare men for deployment. I told them no. Resigned my commission. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't stand in front of soldiers and tell them God would protect them when I knew he wouldn't. Knew he was either absent or indifferent or simply not there at all. My father was disappointed. He'd been so proud when I became a chaplain, following in his footsteps, serving God and country. Now I was walking away from both. You're experiencing doubt, he told me. It's normal after what you've been through. You need time, prayer. You'll find your way back to God. But I didn't want to find my way back. Because if God existed and allowed what I'd seen in Korea, the suffering, the cold, the young boys dying in agony, then he wasn't a God I wanted to worship. And if he didn't exist, then my entire life up to that point had been built on a lie. Either way, I was done. I tried different jobs, nothing religious. Worked in insurance, then sales, then as a teacher. None of it felt right. I was going through the motions of living the way I'd gone through the motions of ministry those last months in Korea. Sarah tried to understand, tried to support me. But she was a woman of deep faith. She couldn't comprehend how I could lose mine, how I could stand in a church and feel nothing, how I could hear prayers and no, they were just words spoken into silence. We divorced in 1955, amicable enough. She took Emily, moved to Wisconsin to be near her family. I didn't fight it. What kind of father was I anyway? Hollow, empty, going through the motions. I met other chaplains sometimes at VFW halls or veteran events. Some had kept their faith, managed to reconcile what they'd seen with their belief in a loving God. I envied them. Others, like me, had lost it. We'd recognize each other without speaking. That same emptiness, that same knowledge that we'd gone to minister to soldiers and returned unable to minister to anyone, including ourselves. One chaplain I met, Father Patrick O'Brien from New York, had been in Korea the same winter I was. Catholic priest, had served at the Chosin Reservoir during the worst of the Chinese offensive. He'd lost his faith, too. I watched men freeze to death while praying the rosary, he told me over drinks in 1957. Watched boys die calling out for God and Mary and every saint in heaven. None of them came. None of them answered. I kept performing last rites, kept blessing the dying, kept telling them God loved them. All lies, all of it. Do you still practice? I asked. I left the priesthood in 53. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't stand at an altar and consecrate bread and wine and pretend it meant anything. What do you do now? Drink mostly. Try to forget. Patrick killed himself in 1959. Carbon monoxide in his garage. The war took him just like it took Danny Kowalski. Just took longer to die. It's 1952 now. Well, I'm recording this in 64, but my mind keeps going back to 52. 12 years since I came home from Korea. 12 years of living without faith, without purpose, without the certainty that sustained me for the first 34 years of my life. I'm 46 years old, never remarried. See my daughter occasionally. She's a teenager now, doesn't really know me. I work as a high school history teacher. It's fine. Pays the bills, fills the time. But I'm empty. Have been since Korea. Since that night, I sat in the snow and screamed at God and got no answer. Since I realized that all the faith, all the prayers, all the certainty I'd built my life on, it was nothing. Just stories we tell ourselves to make sense of a meaningless, cold, indifferent universe. People who knew me before Korea, they ask sometimes what happened to me. Where's the Robert Anderson who was so certain, so faithful, so full of purpose? He died in Korea, froze to death in a trench, watching boys die despite his prayers, bled out in a bunker, holding the hand of an 18-year-old who begged God for mercy and got none. The man who came back, I'm not Robert Anderson. I'm just wearing his face, living in his life, pretending to be him. But inside, I'm as dead as Michael Torres, as Danny Kowalski, as James Murphy. As dead as Patrick O'Brien, who had the courage to admit it and stop pretending. Sometimes I think about that. About stopping. About finally admitting that the war killed me too. Just took longer than a bullet or frostbite. About letting go. But I keep going. Not because I have hope. Not because I believe there's meaning or purpose. Just because stopping seems like too much effort. So I wake up, go to work, come home, drink enough to sleep, repeat. Day after day, year after year. This is what losing faith looks like. Not dramatic, not sudden. Just a slow erosion of everything you believed, everything you were, until nothing remains but the shell. I went to Korea to bring God to soldiers, to be his presence in a dark place, to comfort the dying and give hope to the suffering. But God wasn't there. Or if he was silent, indifferent to the prayers, deaf to the suffering, absent when he was needed most. And if God isn't there when boys are dying in frozen trenches, calling out for him with their last breaths, then where is he? What good is he? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. We just pretend we do. Build churches and pray prayers and tell each other comforting lies about divine plans and mysterious ways. But I've seen the truth. In the snow, in the frozen faces of dead boys, in the empty sky above Korea where no one was listening. There's no one there, just cold and silence and suffering without meaning or purpose or end. I lost my faith in Korea, lost my purpose, lost myself, and I never got any of it back. The chaplain who went to Korea in 1951, he never came home. He's still there, still kneeling in frozen bunkers, praying prayers he doesn't believe, still watching boys die despite his intercession, still searching for God in the snow and finding nothing, still screaming into the silence, still getting no answer, never.